Well, joining us now on the phone is Stephen K. Ray, co-author of The Papacy, What the Pope Does and Why It Matters. Thanks so much for being with us, Stephen.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
If you could start off just to give us a brief synopsis of this book and why you felt this was a good time to inform people about the office and duties of the Pope.
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion in the world today about the papacy and the limits of the authority and what the Pope does and doesn't do, how it got started, why we have a Pope, and so on. So I figured it was a good time to do that, and we wanted the book to be an A to Z, kind of everything you wanted to know about the papacy, so that we would help Catholics and non-Catholics, I'm assuming most will be Catholics, but and also non-Catholics, to a lot of the misconceptions of what the Pope does, to give people a clear idea of the chair of Peter and the office of the papacy and why God established that in his church. So that's kind of an overview of why we did it and what it does.
Sure. And I know you being a convert as yourself, you have a unique perspective of looking, outside and inside the church. Maybe if you could talk about that as well.
Well, I was raised as a Protestant, and I was very anti-Catholic. I remember my father referring to the Pope as the Antichrist, and the church, the Catholic Church, is the whore of Babylon. And we'd say, why do Americans, these are smart people, why do they let some old man in Rome tell them what to do? It was inconceivable to us. We had no idea why Catholics would let some old man in Rome tell them what to do, even in their bedrooms. But it wasn't until I got 39 years old and I saw the problems with Protestantism and the chaos and the divisions and the schisms and all of the various groups competing with each other. I said, that can't be the way Jesus wanted his church to be. This is not the model that he would have intended. So what did he intend? And my conversion to the Catholic Church came because of the problems I saw in Protestantism. That was the first step. It wasn't until only later I saw the beauty of the Catholic Church, and I said, of course he would have put someone in charge. Of course there would be a Peter given the keys of the kingdom, the rock, somebody, a focal point, somewhere where we could all look and have a focal point that would be defending the doctrine and teaching the doctrine. And so that's kind of how, from the outside looking in, I realized there had to be such an office and there had to be such a church. And that was what eventually drew me into the Catholic Church.
And in your research for the book, is there anything that you found that really surprised you maybe about the papacy that Catholics might not even know about?
Well, I have two books on the papacy. One is called Upon This Rock, which I wrote about 15, 20 years ago, and it's a more scholarly work in the sense of footnotes and everything. But in both of these, it's stunning to me to see that the papacy, as it's established in the church, was always intended, even from the Old Testament. That was one of the things that really surprised me as I was coming into an understanding of this whole idea, is that in the Old Testament, Moses came down from the mountain. There was three things he had. First, he had the law written and the tradition and a chair. It says Moses took his seat and judged the people. And Jesus acknowledges it when he said, the scribes and Pharisees sit on the chair of Moses, therefore do whatever they tell you. Don't do what they do because they're hypocrites, but do what they tell you to do from that chair. And then the New Testament, we have the New Israel, which you'd assume has a similar structure of authority as the Old Israel. And sure enough, you have the written word of God, the sacred tradition, and no longer the chair of Moses, but the chair of Peter. So the chair of Peter really is more than 2,000 years old. It goes all the way back 3,500 years, all the way back to Mount Sinai. That was a shocker for me when I started learning about this.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of talk about the papacy as well. Well, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about the papacy?
Well, that the Pope is infallible, meaning that everything he does, it's without flaw, that the Pope can predict baseball scores and the weather a week from now, because, of course, he's infallible, isn't he? So I think the big misconception is that kind of a thing. And the Pope only has to hit this teaching authority that is really authoritative when he speaks on faith and morals. It doesn't necessarily mean when he's on an airplane talking about the environment or whatever else, but it's very focused what his expertise and what his authority is, and faith and morals. And infallibility does not mean that everything he says and does is infallible. It just means that under very strict conditions, that when he defines a doctrine, intending to define a doctrine, and in the areas of faith and morals, as the pastor of the church, and so on, there's very strict structured format what he is infallible in. And I think that's one of the huge misconceptions that people have today about the Pope.
Sure. Do you think the knowledge of the papacy, of the role of the Pope, can aid in the faith lives of Catholics, or at least have them understand their faith better?
I think so. The Pope's job is to defend and to teach the faith. Not all popes do a great job at that. You know, one of the things that we do in the book is we show the good popes and the bad popes, and they're a mixed bag sometimes. But that's what I do in this book is I give you the job description of the Pope. This is what the office of the Pope is. Here's how it got started. Here's what the limitations are, here's what the job is, and so on. And it's not about Pope Francis, or it's not about John Paul II or any other pope. It is basically a job description by which you can actually analyze the different popes and find out how well they're actually doing their job and living up to the job description that the Church has given them over 2,000 years.
It sounds like a great read, Stephen. Where can people find out about how to get the book?
I have it on my website, CatholicConvert.com. And actually, I have it bundled with my conversion story book and a talk I just gave on angels for $20 for the whole batch. So CatholicConvert.com, also Ignatius Press.
That's great. Sounds like a great deal. Thanks so much for being with us today, Stephen. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kevin. God bless. I'd love to join you anytime, so God bless you.
Thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break right now. We'll be back with more of Encounter right after this.